So it is 12 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Chapter 6 is on anxiety disorders, and we're going to spend 3 class sessions talking about these. Anxiety disorders are the most common psychological disorders that people experience. It is extremely common for people to have anxiety that's clinically significant. Now, clinically significant and diagnosable may not be the same thing, but there are certainly lots and lots and lots and lots of people who have significant enough anxiety that it could warrant, treatment. So when you're talking about an anxiety disorder, you're talking about negative emotional responses that have that in common with other mood disorders. You have people who are experiencing unpleasant symptoms that they have fear and worry and trepidation about stuff. We all know what it's like to be scared. We all know what it's like to have fear. We all know what it's like probably to have at least the occasional moment in our life where we're just like, terrified. But for most of us, it's linked to very specific situations that are not normal everyday life things. You have something that scares the hell out of you because, oh God, I was driving and I hit an icy patch in the wintertime and my car spun and it scared the bejesus out of me. Yeah, that's a completely normal response to having something like that happen, losing control of your car. What is not normal is when you have that same level of intensity of response, of fear response, and you're just riding along in the car and there's nothing happening. Or you're stuck in traffic and you're completely safe and it's just annoying and inconvenient, but suddenly you have a panic attack because you're stuck in a traffic jam and you have your claustrophobia set in and you feel trapped. There are all kinds of ways in which anxiety can manifest, can express itself in a person. When you're talking about anxiety, generally speaking, there's a focus on the future and a fear about what's going to happen, whereas with depressive disorders, you're looking towards the past with regret or guilt, and those are definitely things that can coexist in the same person. So it's not extremely rare to see someone who has both anxiety and depression in the same person. Stressful life events can bring about pathological levels of anxiety in people. If you are living in a high stress environment, you're going to experience more anxiety, generally speaking. It becoming pathological has to do with how you respond to those stressors. Anxiety is very commonly expressed through avoidance behavior. It's very commonly expressed through thoughts that maintain anxiety, as in the thought spirals that maintain depression, the rumination that maintains depression. There's also rumination that can happen in anxiety disorders as well. So these are things that are a big part of maintaining that anxiety. The life stressors are certainly, a way that they can be maintained. There are physiological predispositions. If anxiety, is something that you experience a lot of, you may well have family members, a parent that also experiences a lot of anxiety. It is somewhat heritable. It does tend to get somewhat better as you get older because you live through enough stuff as life goes on that you realize that this too shall pass, and it's probably not actually the end of the world when something bad happens to you. And if something scares you and you do it anyway, it loses a lot of its power over you. So there's a lot of that can actually get better with time, which is good. There are physiological aspects to anxiety that are really, really significant because basically we have what our lizard brain is doing to us that causes us to have anxiety. It's that fight or flight response that's centered in, the limbic system of the brain. And those physiological aspects are very unpleasant. The kind of symptoms that you have for anxiety, especially like panic, are also just, kind of things that we all experience at least occasionally when we get scared, when we get nervous. The kind of breathing that we start doing when we get nervous, you start breathing from the top part of your chest and you have shallow respiration. Yeah, you start doing that. Well, that causes your heart rate to go up because you're not getting enough oxygen to your body, which in turn causes your blood pressure to go up, which in turn causes your respiration rate to increase. So it's just a spiral that can send your body into a freaking tizzy before you know it. The physiology also can trigger you to have that kind of panic feeling that a lot of people, at least have occasionally experienced. The heart pounding. I'm sure most of you have experienced a situation where you were about to go up on stage and you were nervous, and you were super nervous. And as soon as you get up on stage and you're doing the thing that you've rehearsed for the last 8 weeks, you're fine. Within, 90 seconds, you're just doing the thing that you've rehearsed, and it's down to like muscle memory, or you're playing the sport that you've been playing for years, and then the anxiety goes away. But it doesn't always. And there are certainly situations where people can get so nervous that they'll pass out. There are situations where people can get so nervous that they'll get sick and vomit or have diarrhea. There are physiological things that can happen, especially when you're talking about panic disorder, that can mimic, some serious health issues, like can mimic having a heart attack. So these are things that our brains, for whatever reason, are doing to just mess with us in situations where there's not an actual danger. It's a fight or flight response gone awry. It's an oversensitive fight or flight response for so many people. And a lot of the anxiety they experience isn't because of an actual threat. It's because of their body responding to an innocuous situation as a threat to their well-being and potentially their life. Now, are there situations where you might have a lot of anxiety because it's completely justified? Yeah, of course. There are, dangerous situations because of the weather. There are dangerous situations because you're in, a big crowd of traffic where you're driving and it's dangerous potentially at night or something like that because of, icy patch on the road. I have been robbed at gunpoint at an ATM machine. Did that cause my limbic system to go into overdrive? Did my flight or flight response be, oh my God, I don't think my heart was beating normally again for hours after that. And I didn't use an ATM machine for a long time, and that's another thing that's very, very common, avoidance behavior. One of the big problems with anxiety disordered individuals is they engage in a lot of avoidance of the situations that scared them. Like, I had that experience with an ATM machine, and it was in broad daylight, and it was in a good neighborhood, and all this stuff, and it scared the bejesus out of me, and I didn't use an ATM machine for probably about 10 years, and I will not use one at night. And it wasn't at night when I got robbed, but I will not use one at night. I generally will only use one if the bank is open and there are people around, because it was on a Saturday afternoon when I got robbed. Is that indicative of an anxiety disorder? No, that's an indicative of me just having I don't want to do that. Is that negatively impacting my ability to function? Absolutely not. It's a minor inconvenience at worst. But there are certainly plenty of ways in which anxiety disorders do negatively impact people's ability to function on a daily or near daily basis. when you're talking about prevalence, the most common of the anxiety disorders are the simple phobias, the specific things that people are really, really scared of, like the arachnophobia, the acrophobia, the claustrophobia, those type of things, agoraphobia. Those very specific kinds of phobias that can really interfere with people's ability to function. Panic disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, each about 3% of people. But at any given time, I think like 18% of people have clinically, legitimately symptomatic enough to be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. And over a lifetime, nearly a third of people at some point will have significant enough symptoms to meet the diagnostic criteria for an anxiety disorder. There are also significant gender differences. It's about 23% of women versus 14% of men. It is much more common for women to experience anxiety in life in general, and there are a lot of reasons for that. We're far more often the victims of a lot of violent type of crimes, so there are reasons that women, frankly, should be a little more anxious about such things. There are higher relapse rates for women, again, a time when you are just symptomatic again. But here's the thing about anxiety disorders, and I hate to be, the bearer of bad news, but they don't go away completely. You can get better, certainly. You can reduce the amount of anxiety that you have in your life, but if you are a highly anxious person, all the therapy in the world is not going to make you a not anxious person. That's sadly part of who we are sometimes. There are people that just have a tendency towards anxiety, and therapy can help reduce the amount of anxiety. It can certainly get it to non-clinically significant levels, but it's still going to be there. We can't just wave a magic wand and go, oh, you're never going to feel anxious again, because anxiety is protective. There are reasons that we get scared in certain situations, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. To be fearless about everything isn't a good thing. If you're completely fearless, you're also going to put yourself in harm's way. You're not going to be paying attention to things that could hurt you or kill you. So it's not possible to completely eliminate anxious symptomology. There are things that are scary. There are things that make us nervous, and that's okay, as long as it's not interfering with your ability to function. Is it interfering with your ability to do the things that you need to do versus interfering with some things you might want to do is also a big part of determining whether it's normal or pathological with your worry. We all worry about things. It's a totally normal experience as a human being to worry about stuff. How much worry? About what kind of things? Are you worrying about things that you can do anything about? Are you worrying about things that are absolutely out of your control and it's interfering with your functioning? To be worrying about these things that are completely out of your control? Is it interfering with your ability to function is by far the most meaningful thing. Is it causing you a great deal of dysfunction? People who worry have a voice inside their head that just tells them to be scared of everything all the time. All sorts of things. When you talk about generalized anxiety disorder in particular, it's just worry about lots of stuff. Just all sorts of things, and you're going to be worrying about all of them. It's not just one thing. Lots of people who have anxiety disorders it's mainly focused on a few specific things that they find very unpleasant. It is a very common thing to have a phobia about public speaking. It's called glossophobia. That's the most common phobia that there is. And for most of us, it's not that big of an issue. How many jobs are there where you have to get up in front of people and talk all the time? Well, there's mine. When I was in high school, I was absolutely terrified of getting up in front of the class. absolutely terrified. I would dread having to do a book report all semester, and all I had to do was get up and read the damn thing. And it would terrify me the whole semester. I probably should have seen a therapist, honestly. But it was, early 80s. Nobody cared. It just wasn't talked about. And as I've gotten older, I've been teaching now since 2008. So this is my 13th year. If all I had to do was get up and read something, oh, piece of cake. I could do that in front of thousands of people. I mean, I'd be kind of nervous. Mainly, I'd be like, oh, don't trip before you get to the podium. But there are all sorts of things that can cause people pathological levels of worry. Does it make sense for you to be worried about this particular thing? Gee, I found a lump in my breast. I have a mammogram scheduled and I'm really worried. Yeah, that's pretty legitimate reason to be worrying. If you're worrying about something like that all the time, that's not normal. That's pathological. If you're worried about it because, there's a chance, at least, a decent chance that something you found might be a life-altering health issue, that's normal. It's not fun, but it's normal. How many times have I gotten a little bit congested or had the sniffles or had a touch of a sore throat or something over the last year and a half and been like, oh God, did I get the COVID? Is that normal? Yeah, it's normal. Pathological worry is the kind that can really interfere with our functioning. We all worry too much sometimes. I mean, again, it's just part of being human, but the level and the amount and frequency and intensity of worry is what makes the difference between, whether it's normal or pathological. When you're talking about generalized anxiety disorder, it's the name of it really says what it is. It's generalized. You're worrying about everything, and you can't worry about everything. But these people will give it the old college try. They worry about all sorts of things, and it can't just be one thing. It's worrying excessively, more days than not, for at least 6 months. And that's exhausting. I mean, it's just psychologically exhausting to be anxious. You don't have room for other things in your life when you're super anxious because the anxiety takes up all your mental energy. When people are so worried that it's causing them significant distress, when it's out of their control, when they feel like they don't have any ability to shut the worry off, they can't distract themselves from it. They can't get busy in other things without having the anxiety still just like it's like a background noise in their lives, a very unpleasant background noise in their lives. And again, generalized anxiety disorder, we're talking about 3% of people. So in this country alone, we're talking about 10 million-ish people at any given time that have generalized anxiety disorder. That's a lot of people that are struggling to function against this relentless wave after wave after wave of worry. And it is something that's very treatable. Anxiety disorders are very, very treatable. And as I said before, you can't just wave a magic wand and make it go away completely. But you can get significant improvement with a relatively short amount of time needed. So it is really important for people to know that about it. When you're talking about people with generalized anxiety disorder, they do a lot of self-talk that maintains anxiety. Like I talked about rumination with depressive disorders. Rumination is also part of anxiety disorders too. It's just thinking about all of the different things that you can be worried about instead of thinking about, like with depression, you see all the things. With rumination, it's like all the bad things that have happened to you. With anxiety, the rumination is all the bad things that could happen. And oh my God, the list of things that could happen is a lot bigger than the list of things that did actually happen. So, in that way, the kind of rumination that happens with anxiety disorders is even worse because you're looking at a whole world of possibilities, a multiverse of potential things to be scared of. You can always find something to be afraid of. You can always find something to be scared of. You can always find something to worry about if that's what you're looking for. And for whatever reason, there are brains that just worry. There is a certain amount of heritability in anxiety disorders, and if you were raised by an anxious person, you're probably going to respond to a lot of things in the world with anxiety, partly because of learning and partly because of genetics potentially, but the two together, you're probably going to be looking at the world through the eyes of an anxious person, and that's potentially very problematic. When you're talking about other disorders like panic disorder, panic attacks, a panic attack is just that. It is an attack of panic. It is out of the blue, typically, or triggered by a particular situation. They are sudden in their onset. They are extremely intense. And it's just a sudden, overwhelming experience of fear, of fright, of terror, of panic. Basically, what's going on in someone who's having a panic attack is their fight or flight response is being triggered at an inopportune time. They are having that fight or flight response in response to something that's not dangerous. If it is dangerous, then there's a reason for you to have that fight or flight response. It's because you need to run or you need to fight. And so often when people have panic attacks, there's nothing to run from, there's nothing to fight. It's a circumstance. It's a situation that you're in. And panic attacks can come out of the blue, out of nowhere, and not have any kind of trigger at all. You'll be standing in line at the grocery store like you've done 1,000 times before, and this time you have a freaking panic attack for no particular reason, just your brain decides to go, hey, let's be an asshole today and really mess with this person while they're in line at the store. I have known of people who left full baskets of groceries and just ran. And here's the hellacious thing about panic attacks. When you run, you get relief and you do feel better. And it reinforces the running away. Yeah, that's not good. Because the more you run away, the more power it has over your life. Here's the thing about panic attacks, too. They rarely last more than about 5 minutes. But it's the longest freaking 5 minutes you've ever had, trust me. That. I've had them before. They suck. It's the longest damn 5 minutes you ever had. If you can ride it out, you can ride it out. And it won't mess with your life. But it's very, very difficult to do that. And when people have a panic disorder with agoraphobia, it can become even worse, because agoraphobia is fear of open spaces, or fear of the marketplace is what the term actually means from ancient Greek. But what agoraphobia really is a fear of places where you can't easily escape when you're talking about agoraphobia. When you're talking about panic disorder with agoraphobia, it means people are having a really hard time with situations where there are crowds or where they're on like public transportation where you can't easily escape. And this agoraphobia can be so severe that people will become housebound. So think about someone who has a panic attack in the line at the grocery store and they run and then they feel better. and they look at that grocery store. So like they went to Walmart and they run away from Walmart. Oh, and you feel so much relief after you get out of there. And the panic attack was probably about to run its course anyway, but the running is very reinforcing. And then you have this negative association with Walmart. Well, yeah, there's plenty of negative association to have with Walmart. But if you run out of a store where you have a panic attack, then you have what's called anticipatory anxiety, where you worry about having another panic attack. Well, one of the things that you can do is avoid the places that you had a panic attack in before, right? Except it just makes your world get smaller and smaller and smaller. So you live in Arkadelphia. We only got 2 places to buy groceries anyway, really. Got 2 grocery stores. We've got Walmart and Brookshire's. That's it. So if you have a panic attack in Walmart, okay, so now you're buying your groceries at Brookshire's. What if you have a panic attack in Brookshire's? Then what? Then you got no place to buy groceries? What are you going to do? Drive to Hot Springs just because you need to buy some groceries? It can make your world get really small and really complicated really fast. You can keep withdrawing from places where you were uncomfortable, where you felt panicky, and in a matter of months, you can have someone who won't leave their house. You can have someone who, in the most severe case I've ever heard of, was a woman, and it is far more women than men, where a woman actually couldn't even leave her own bedroom suite. I mean, there was a bathroom, but she was scared to leave her own bedroom. And the thing with this that's so both tragic and honestly kind of ridiculous is that it's all this jail that you made up in your own head through the irrationality of your limbic system. That fight or flight response comes from one of the most primitive parts of our brains. It's one of the dumbest parts of us. And yet it can wield a lot of power because it's so uncomfortable. It's so unpleasant. Panic attacks are so incredibly uncomfortable and unpleasant to go through. But they do only last a few minutes. If you can help someone learn to talk to their panic attack and go, piss off. There's nothing here for me to be this freaked out about. What are you doing? I mean, talk to it like it's some jerk person that's separate from you. I've talked people through this. I mean, put that bad dog back in its cage in your head. It might still growl and make noise and, stink up the place a little, but it doesn't have to be this big controlling part of your life. Now, that being said, is it going to go away completely? Probably not. But if you can reduce the number of panic attacks someone's having by half or more, is that going to have a positive impact on their life? God, yes. If you can get them to a point where they can control their anxiety to the point where it never gets to a panic attack or almost never gets to a panic attack, is that going to improve their quality of life? Damn right it is. And that is something that is absolutely within the possibility with some relatively short-term therapy. There is cognitive behavioral therapy that can help a lot with these things. There are other kinds of therapy. I'll talk about therapeutic methods, but these are things that can be dealt with. And these are things that are well within the realm of possibility for people. So that is one thing. If you are someone who does have a lot of anxiety, please do know that there is a lot of help out there that is not that hard to get. It's not that hard to get significant improvement. Again, not going to sit and blow smoke at you and tell you, oh, yes, we can completely eliminate your anxiety. Probably not, because it's an inborn thing. And it's a good thing to have fear sometimes. People that are fearless get themselves into situations where they can get hurt or killed. I mean, it's a good thing to a point to be fearless, but there's also a point at which it can be really dangerous for people to be too fearless. We have fears for reasons. I mean, our ancestors, again, we're kind of biologically hardwired to have some of these tendencies towards anxiety because the people who ran away from danger lived another day to potentially have another kid, which might have been your, great, 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 great grandfather or something, or grandmother. So, we do have some reasons that it is more common to have anxiety disorders because they keep us alive. Being afraid of stuff makes us change our behavior in ways that protect us if there is an actual danger. The problem with a lot of anxiety disorders is there's not any actual danger going on. It's a completely innocuous situation, and you're freaking out like it is a life or death situation. And it's not. You're stuck in traffic. I mean, being stuck in traffic sucks, but it's rarely a life threatening situation. And one of the things that happens with panic attacks in particular, the physiological aspects of panic attacks, you can have all of this whole cascade of unpleasant sensations that go through your body when you have a panic attack. And there are so many, well, probably not as many right now, but there are a lot of people who end up in emergency rooms because they have panic attacks, because some of them mimic heart attacks. There's certainly plenty of like gastrointestinal distress that can happen. The nervous poops, that's part of it. And that's definitely not something. If you had a situation where you got stuck in traffic and suddenly, you get super scared and you start panicking and then you suddenly need to desperately go to the bathroom, that's a bad place for that to happen. Or if you're stuck on a bus with no bathroom or something like that. Those, that's is part of it, and more than people generally will admit or talk freely about. But just when when we get scared, there's a reason that the term scares the out of people or scared the out of me. Yeah, that's a thing. People don't talk about it that much because, well, frankly, it's kind of gross. It's a bodily function. But that's a real thing when we get super scared. If you scare animals, you startle a goose, they crap. That's what they do. You scare a chicken, they're going to poop. Well, there's plenty of people that it's kind of the same thing. I mean, not quite as severe, but, not that different. That can certainly make someone engage in a lot of agoraphobic behavior. If you have a panic attack and suddenly, you are having those kinds of difficulties, is that going to make you withdraw and not want to go back someplace where, you can't like easily get to a bathroom or something? So all of these different physiological things that happen also definitely have a lot to do with maintaining these kinds of disorders as well. So again, there's a lot of physical things that you can do. There's medication. I mean, if you know that traveling, again, barring all this insanity from the pandemic, if you are a person who finds flying to be anxiety inducing, and if you are someone who's had panic attack when you've been on a flight, and you have tummy issues and you might have some more severe kind of issues, there's medications that can be prescribed. There are beta blockers. There are other kinds of meds that can be given to kind of help counter that, assuming that it's something that you only need, occasionally. If you're having to fly every week for your job, if you're, I don't know, a pilot and you have those kinds of issues, then yeah, you've got to sort that out. But for most of us, flying is not an everyday activity. It's something that we do, maybe once a year, twice a year. Even as much as my husband used to travel before the pandemic, it was rare that he flew anywhere more than once a month. He did occasionally, but in a situation like that, yeah, then you need to get some help and you might need some medication. But these are things that can get a lot of improvement at the very least. So it is something to consider. Okay, so for the rest of the week, you've got your assignment. Just to kind of make sure that you're aware of this, Chapter 6 is the last chapter before the first exam in here. So the first exam will be, this time next week. So it'll be like, next Friday's class. I mean, it's not going to be just Friday, but that first test is coming up next week, late next week. So do make sure that you've kind of read over everything, looked at all the video. I mean, I'm assuming you've done your assignments because you're good students, but if you have not done those, at the very least watch the videos, because you will need to know, at least be familiar with those videos and things. It'll help a lot for just the taking the exam. And I'll cover some more of that next week. But Monday we will meet again. Obviously, it's not a holiday, and I will talk about some other anxiety disorders. The phobias will be one of the main things we'll talk about on Monday. So I'll cover all of that. And y'all have a good rest of your week, and we'll see you on Monday.